we go. I'm Joel Gunderson.
I am Adam Rack.
And this is Winesplained.
Being in the wine industry here in Oregon, we get a lot of questions about sustainability, about production, and sometimes we have to say, we'll get back to you on that.
Yeah, this is us getting back to you. Maybe not answering the questions, probably more like blowing them up a bit.
Well, today's episode is focusing on packaging and sort of sustainability around that. And today's guest is Jess Pierce.
Hi.
Hello. How's your day?
That's great. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah,
I'm super excited to be talking to you guys about this for so many reasons.
Yeah. Well, as I was thinking about like how do we introduce Jess Pierce, and there's so many. I feel like you are Pierce Riesling. You are with Walter Scott. You have lots of different roles that you play here in the wine community here in Oregon. And I don't know, I was thinking earlier today, just like how just like multifaceted you are as a person. So I was thinking we could have had Jess to jump in on a bunch of different topics, but I'm really stoked to have you here to talk about packaging.
Yeah, because you're a partner with us.
Definitely.
And the refillables.
Yeah, I started putting my wine in refillable bottles because of you guys. You were the voice of reason and gave me an option of something that I didn't know existed. Mm-hmm. I'm lucky that I get to wear a lot of hats in the wine industry. Just how my personality is, I feel like I couldn't do the same thing every day and be okay with it. I really like the idea of every day has something different to offer. My main gig is Walter Scott, working with Erica Landon and Kim Paolo. They're amazing. We've been friends for well over a decade. Erica was my first wine teacher. I worked at a restaurant called Ned Ludd back in the day, and Ken was a wine rep, making wine as well on the side, but his main day job was selling wine. And so Erica was like, I'll send my cute boyfriend in to show you some wines. And he did. And he was just so knowledgeable and a great rep to work with. And then when they released their first vintage of Walter Scott, I was the first one to put it on by the glass in a restaurant. And then now all these years later, I'm, working with them and selling Walter Scott. And because of them, I'm able to do so many other projects, including Pierce Riesling, which is my 250 case production Riesling from the Gorge that I make at Walter Scott with the help of Ken and Erica. And that wine is the one that's in the refillable bottles. I also teach at Linfield University. I teach wine geography and the intro to wine business, working with people to really explain the business side of wine is something I think is really valuable, because I feel like a lot of people can make wine, but then they don't know what to do with it afterwards. So that's been really eye-opening for me, who as a small business owner needs to know all of this stuff. And I get to teach other people, and it helps me learn as well. The wine geography class, I've just started that this semester. And it really is one of those things that keeps me on my toes. I want to learn everything I can so that I can be a good teacher. And I feel like the idea of being shamed in front of students motivates me really hard to read wine geography books and get new editions of the World Atlas of Wine and stay relevant in my wine knowledge.
Right.
And it's super exciting to get to share that with people. So I do lots of different things in the wine world. I just got back from Nebraska, opening a restaurant in Nebraska. I haven't worked in a restaurant in 10 years, but
there you were opening one.
There I was opening a restaurant and getting to share my wine knowledge with people who had fast food experience before, who had never really drank a bottle of wine or thought about it while they drank it, if they had consumed any wine. It was a very challenging experience, but it really made me go back to my basics of wine education and get to share and really have some eye-opening moments and some really wow light bulb moments with some people that really had no idea about wine and are now excited about it.
Well, just accessibility. I'm also from the Midwest, from Kansas, which Midwest, generic.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
It's just hard to access wine outside of the big brands for the most part. And imagine that was an issue out there as well.
It was definitely. When we put together the initial wine order, we ended up getting about 60% of the wines that we ordered actually in the restaurant. because of just not having those wines be available to us. And so when you start thinking about really diving in onto the more sustainable producers and the wines that are produced in a way that I feel good about, you don't get that spread through the nation in the same way that you do the big producers. And luckily, a lot of the big producers are now doing really great things as well. And you can get some solid wines, but it's very different than the access that we have in Portland or New York or in these bigger cities where there are, more distribution.
So, coming from your experience as a wine business professor, what exactly made you decide to follow us loony folks over here, putting your wine in a beer bottle, outside of just the sustainability aspect?
Well, so I sell my own wine. I sell and distribute my own wine, and I can tell my story. And I feel like if I can sell Riesling, I can sell Riesling in any bottle, right? The challenge itself is not
Amen.
what's in the bottle. It's not what the bottle is, it's what is inside of it, right? And so I don't get to make that many choices as a small producer. I get to decide where I buy these grapes from. I don't get to farm them. I get to decide how I make the wine, and I get to decide what package I put it in, and then that's it. A lot of people that have big wineries make a lot more decisions than I do. So I really was thinking about what I can do in my very tiny footprint to make it even tinier. And the main thing, we talk about organic, we talk about biodynamic, we talk about all the sustainability in the vineyard, but we're not talking about the amount of waste that we put out as a wine industry. And it is absolutely huge. We make so much trash. We use tons of water, just a lot of the things that you put on a bottle in the first place are trash. Using a capsule these days is insane. Anybody who's using a wine capsule needs to rethink that, because that is an extra piece of trash. I mean, it was originally intended to keep rats from digging through bottles. I don't think that's really a problem for most people these days, is their cellars full of rats trying to get into their wine. And if it is, you probably have some other things to work out first.
Yeah.
So, just thinking about how to streamline that, not put a capsule on a bottle, and use everything that you're working with in that to be as sustainable as possible. So when you guys presented me the idea, I think I don't know, I was delivering some wine to you, and you were like, "Hey, look at this. We've just bottled this." It was for that Project Trevor fundraiser, right?
Yeah.
It was a rosé that you put in bottle, and the packaging looked really good. It was a beer bottle.
Yeah.
But I'm used to seeing beer bottles. It wasn't a package I've never seen before. So instantly it was familiar. And I think for me, I like the idea of a bottle better than I do a Tetra Pak, or better than I do, using plastics. This idea worked for me because I make a small production and I keep it all in state. For a lot of producers, this wouldn't work because a lot of people ship outside of state, and aren't selling just here. But because I distribute my wine, I sell it alongside Walter Scott in the Portland and in the Oregon market, and direct to people. I have control over where it goes.
Yeah.
And that's something that is beginning to change, right? I have people asking for my wines outside of Oregon at this point, and I'm having to try to figure out what that looks like for me. The thing is, I don't have to sell my wine outside of Oregon because I sell it all here. I make more money if I sell my wine myself, but I also am excited for other people to drink it. I have an opportunity right now to send wine to Korea, and that's something that's kind of exciting to me because I met someone who I think would represent the wines really well there. So the logistics and figuring that out of how I would send wines, I feel like for what I want to do, shipping bottles full of wine is impactful, right? That's heavy. It is a lot of energy to ship bottles regardless of what they are made out of across the world. And we do that all the time.
Yeah. It's a lot of blank space.
It's a lot of blank space. So I'm looking at different ideas of how to do that. Would I send bulk wine over and have it bottled there? So that would be less weight in shipping. That's something maybe I think I could stand behind if it was done in a certain way. But I don't feel good about just sending bottles across the ocean for the small winery I am. It doesn't make sense. So I have to start thinking about what that looks like to me.
Yeah. I think you touched on this earlier, but there is a lot of discussion around sustainability, how we grow, how we package, how we do all of this other, the in between, from the grapes to the exporting, to bottling, to kegging, to whatever you're doing to send it to the consumer. But the statistics are, like 30 to 40% of the emissions are the packaging, the moving the glass from China to here or from Chile to California. I think there's a lot of, it feels like we aren't talking about that a lot in the Willamette Valley. It's just something that we're beginning to reckon with. Do you see that sort of in all your sales and working with the other brands and restaurants?
Yeah, I do. I definitely see that. I feel like people want to do the right thing, but when it comes down to it, they're going to default to the things that's easier and cheaper, just because that's how business works. When you think about sustainability, there are a lot of different kinds of sustainability. We always talk about environmental sustainability, but there's the planet, the people, and the profits that are the three tiered sustainability thing. You have to look at all of these things to make your business work. If I focus on an environmental sustainability to the point where I can't pay my bills to cover the bottling costs, then it's not going to make sense for me to do the sustainable thing if I want to stay in business. So there's always the question to ask of how you do that and balance it. I'm in a very special position because I have such a small wine production. So I can make this happen on a small scale and do it in a way that makes sense. But if I was to double my production or even, go to 1,000 cases a year, it would change how I would look at it.
Yeah.
Well, we've been talking a lot about these bottles, but I don't think that we actually went over just how cool these bottles are. Did we want to jump into that at all? And
yeah, I think the thing that really I like about this bottle, and also something that could be a game changer in the industry at the place we are right now, is that it is produced in Oregon.
Right.
I think that's a huge deal, is that this glass is not coming from overseas. It is produced, if I'm right, it's produced in the state.
In Portland.
In Portland
as well.
And right now in the wine industry, bottles are really hard to get because of all the supply chain issues. And I tried to order some glass for something else, and it's not available. If you want a bottle this year on the West Coast, you're going to have a lot of trouble getting 750 standard bottles. And this could maybe fill a hole for something with somebody whose intention is not necessarily sustainability, but, oh, here we have a bottle we can use. We can actually get our product into bottle. Yeah. That could be something that, is kind of a byproduct of a crazy world and situation that we're in right now. These bottles are 500 milliliter. That has been a game changer in the way that I think about wines and the way I drink wines. It is an amazing size for a bottle. It's not something I was initially thinking about. Whenever we started talking about the bottle size, I'm like, how do you market this? Like, what are you guys talking about? And we kind of had this idea of like a bistro bottle or something like that. This was, by the way, in February of 2020 when we had this conversation. I bottled my first vintage in refillable bottles on March 8th of 2020.
I drove that trailer down, the bottler down the day that we shut down, I believe.
We didn't know about masks yet. Everything was weird in the world. We had just had our open house at Walter Scott with like 250 people in the winery, and we weren't sure what was going on. It was right at the beginning of when the world changed because of COVID. And I moved forward and put my wine in bottle. And I remember bottling day was really weird. We did it outside because we weren't sure what was going on. Everybody was like washing their hands constantly, and we were all super nervous about being together. And I feel like if I'd have waited one more week to bottle, I wouldn't have bottled my wine that year. It was right before that happened. So I had all of this wine. I was scared to death that I wasn't going to be able to sell it because the world was ending. And little did I know that this is a perfect size package for a smaller group of people to enjoy. And I feel like I've seen so many people taking this bottle, in their backpack up to the top of a mountain or on a beach or in a place where you could just drink it out of the bottle and open it with a bottle opener instead of a wine opener. And it has this accessibility to it that I feel like people, I think a lot of people drink beer and you drink it out of the bottle, and that feels very normal to them. When I started seeing people drinking my Riesling out of the bottle, I was like, what is happening here?
That must have made you happy.
It made me so happy. I got so excited the first time I saw somebody just pulling it from the bottle, and I was like, that is amazing. This is like a personal size bottle. Yeah, it's a lot for one serving for sure. That's not the intention, but a lot of people use it like that, bring it to the park and split it between 2 people, and it's been a really fun size for the world that we're in right now. And also kind of works as a 2-glass pour for that bistro bottle that we had initially talked about, and restaurants are doing great with it as far as that goes now.
Yeah.
Well, and we've seen, at least a lot of comments coming in about the size on our end as well, because there's so many people that consumed heavily, myself included, in 2020, and this year we're like, we got to lighten up, because we're going to be here for a while.
This is
this
going to be something we're going to be dealing with for a long time. And and with the style of wine that I put in here too, it's a lower alcohol wine. My wines this one has a little bit of residual sugar, and it comes in at about 11% alcohol. So compared to say a normal bottle where you're talking 12.5, 13, 14% sometimes, this is definitely a more refreshing, lightweight beverage than you can normally get.
So one of the questions we get, or I hear a lot, whether it's with keg wine or with these refillable bottles, is, does the wine age well in these bottles? Now, part of me, my immediate response is often, I know you're going to drink that wine quickly. Don't. Why are you asking me this question? Like, we know that, like, what is it? The median time for opening a bottle of wine after purchase is 30 minutes. And so there's a part of me that's like, well, is that a real question? Like, why are you asking me that question?
Yeah, how many people are going to sit this?
Yeah.
15. What's yours retail at? $15 bottle down in their cellar for years. It's a daily drinker. It's what we drink.
I'm pretty, the thing is that this was capped up, like you said, right at the beginning of the pandemic. So this has been under closure for
almost 2 years.
Almost 2 years now, and we just popped this bottle.
It's like really
singing.
showing well.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm going to keep some of it. I'm going to keep a case or so and see how it ages and open it up over time, because it's something I'm really curious about. I feel like the wine is aging under the cork. I mean, under the caps, what's it called? Crown cap. Yes, there we go. I feel like it is evolving and developing, but at a very, very, very slow rate. Right now, it still has trapped CO2 in it. It still has like all its primary fresh flavors. It's not showing any signs of age on the nose, but it is mellowed out a little bit. Some of those harsh edges that you get from right after bottling have come around, and I feel like I've noticed an evolution in it because I've tasted it regularly over the last 2 years.
I just often wonder, though, if that question itself is, we've been talking about exclusivity recently as well, but also like the question itself is like a way of attacking alternative packaging. It's like saying like, hey, we're going to ask this question about the age-worthiness of wine, which is, of course, the most important aspect of wine ever, is whether or not it's age-worthy. But we're doing it, I feel like that question itself is sort of a way to step around the sort of like idea of being able to put our wine in different packaging. Earlier you said like it matters what's inside the bottle, not the package itself. I've personally experienced through the years a lot of pushback against the packaging itself, through keg wine, but then of course through our wine as well, as far as fine wine buyers are concerned, or even, some people in the general public. Have you, like when you transition, you did your first vintage, beautiful sort of Alsatian style bottle, if I remember.
My first three vintages under hot bottles.
Yeah,
I did. People love those bottles too, because they're so tall and grand and not your normal size. The Hock bottle is the traditional German style bottle that's really slender with no shoulders on it. I think it's a really graceful looking bottle. And it lets you know the style too, because of, Riesling and Alsace and these countries that do these fresh white wines. They put their wines in that. As far as age-worthiness, if you're putting something that is age-worthy in the bottle in the first place and you're sealing it, I mean, the chances that is going to evolve in a similar way as a regular bottle is really high. I feel like I make a wine, and not a lot of people know that Riesling is very age worthy, but because it has structural components like sugar, like alcohol, like the insane amount of acid, the low pH, these wines can last a really, really long time. You know, I've had older Rieslings from the 1950s that have still had freshness to them. And that was mind blowing when it happened. So I think that if you put an age worthy wine in a bottle like this, it is going to age well.
Right.
And we won't know unless we do more tests on it. But the crown cap is a really good closure.
Right.
It has a semi permeable membrane underneath the cap itself that allows the wine to, you know, age a little bit with it. And I think, just judging by the 2 years I've had this under a bottle, I wouldn't be surprised if it did well at 10 years. So I'm curious to see that play out.
Yeah. And I mean, this is to some extent the same conversation we had when screw caps came around.
Exactly.
Right?
And look what we're seeing in screw caps right now. I mean, you can age wines in screw caps in great ways. They make really high quality ones. Maybe right at first they didn't, but the world is changing. And for people to have that stigma on the packaging, that's just a small-minded thinking. That's all it is. They don't know better. This is something that you've done for a long time, and people don't like change.
Right.
People need to embrace change because the world is changing. And if they don't change, they're not going to be keeping up with it.
Is that, you know, like when you're teaching business to the business of wine to people, do you talk at all about how we have to think about reinventing ourselves as a wine industry?
Definitely.
And you know, I mean, when we think of, I think one of the big components that, you know, even early on when we talked about these bottles was how this packaging itself is a massive reinvention. And I feel like it really, for some people get offended by these bottles.
Maybe pure like the color, right?
Yeah,
Like,
they get offended by, like, or when I'm like, hey, you should put your wine in this bottle, they're like, I don't think so, Joel. You know, like, I see that works for you, and you're going to go do your little alt packaging thing that you do, Mr. Gunderson. But
so cute.
Yeah. But, you know, it's not for my brand. And I don't, you know, I obviously, like, we are trying to be somewhat evangelistic about these bottles. So I guess, you know, like in your experience with people who are studying to come into the industry to build their businesses, do you see kind of in this next generation of people, like any hope that they want to change that, or that they're looking towards like alternative packaging as a little differently than the last round of?
I think I have to have hope in that, right? I think it'd be really sad if we didn't have hope for the future. That's the reason that we do things that are sustainable, because we're planning for future generations to have something. Yeah. And if they aren't planning on continuing that, then this cycle isn't going to go into a good place. I think there's a lot of young people who are really excited about this packaging. I'm getting a younger audience that are buying them. Right. So there's 20 somethings that are really, really excited about this wine. And I have friends that have art galleries, and they have it in their galleries as something when they host openings, they pour, and people are so excited about it when they see it. They're like, we've never had wine like this. And that makes me really happy. And I think the more they see it, the more that they're going to get used to it, and it's going to become very commonplace. So it just takes more people doing it. And the challenges that we have with this are the fact that it is just, you know, Oregon right now. And if we have the entire West Coast on board, and then hopefully the entire United States, and then going from there where everyone is using something that is a more sustainable package, then it's going to be very commonplace. And these 750 bottles are going to be antiquated. These regular bottles, no one will be using them at some point, because we won't be able to. We don't have the resources to continue this. Yeah. That is the problem. It's not that we want to. We're going to be forced out of this eventually. So you can make the choice now, or you can be forced into it in the future when everybody has to. That's the decision. It's not about this not working.
I absolutely love this, like, energy, this train of
I'm
thought.
getting worked up.
You know, speaking on that though, there are, it feels like this program has actually sort of fizzled out. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of support from my side as a producer, from the management of this program. They're not going to like that I'm saying this, but you know, it was such a revolutionary idea, but now there are quite a few other companies that are really just like eclipsing and out there and marketing. And if you get on platforms like LinkedIn, where people are actively talking about this, you'd think that this was everywhere. But if you're in Oregon, people don't know about it. The consumer isn't educated. And that's something that this podcast is hoping to change. We're hoping to change. The other breweries that are part of it, Double Mountain, Gigantic, they're committed to this. Double Mountain managed their own program, which I can't even imagine the logistics of setting up a refillable system and dealing with grocery stores before the statewide system. But if we look to California, there's a company called Conscious Containers that is trying to create this circular economy. So we're here in Oregon. We have this opportunity for any brewery to join, any winery, any soda company, but we're not progressing very quickly. When you look at other regions, Byron Brewery is a Montana brewery, and they've been refilling regular standard glass bottles for years, and that was something that people said was impossible. So it's a little frustrating. And I do love the idea that we have to have that hope. But at the same time, we have hurdles. So how can we fix these? We have people that just don't know about it. Currently 75% of glass just isn't recycled anyway. So is there the opportunity to, get consumers on board, to get restaurants on board?
Well, I think the opportunity comes through education and accessibility. Those two things together, you have to let people know what is happening and that this is a thing. I feel like the question that I get from most people when they buy this wine is, so I wash it and then I give it back to you. And I'm like, please don't give it back to me. No. And I tell them about how the bottle drop system works. And, it's a very easy system where you can get, you open an account, you get a number, and you can, what I do, I get the bags, these big bags, you fill them up, and then you drop them off at the bottle drop, which are everywhere, literally. Right. And it's very easy. And a couple of the people that I'm working with are doing really cool things. Like they're waiting till they get to a certain amount of like $200, for instance. One of my accounts, every time he gets his bottle drop up to $200, he donates that to a different charity. And I think that's a really cool thing to do. So, it's 10 cents a bottle that the deposit is. And so that can really add up. That can be a lot of money for people that need it, right? And in Portland, we have a huge problem with homeless people. We're not taking care of the people on our streets and in our communities, and they're forced to live out in the world in terrible conditions. And they go through our recycling and pick up bottles and cans. I live in a neighborhood where every Sunday when I put my trash out, I have someone coming to collect it before the trash guys come the next morning. And then a lot of times I will have everything collected and waiting for them with my bottles, right. And it's a horrible thing in Portland right now and in a lot of places in the world. But projects like this can help people in a lot of ways too, that we don't even think about.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we pride ourselves on Oregon's return rate for bottles. I think it's something like 90%, but
yeah,
that's a significant portion of it.
That's a significant portion of it, because a lot of people are too lazy to recycle. Right. They really are. We're too lazy to bring it to the the Oregon bottle drop. Me. And I think that's a lot of the ways these bottles get back, is because there's this other system that we're not talking about as far as sustainability goes. And that really talks about our social responsibilities in a lot of ways more than environmental.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot of other misconceptions about alternative packaging I think I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So you mentioned Tetra Paks earlier. The branding coming from them, the marketing coming from them, is that Tetra Paks can solve a lot of this issue because they're lightweight, they're easy to ship, they're flat, they ship flat, and you fill them up, a lot of them. But at the end of the day, it's plastic mixed with aluminum, like a foil, mixed with cardboard. I think we all know that that's very
not
hard.
Ideal.
It's very hard to separate all those. So all the statistics are pointing towards this, what we're doing, this refillable system. And I think that's going to be difficult to implement. We talk about the restaurants and getting them to actually commit to it. And even in our own house, it's hard to educate everybody to make sure that all those bottles get saved. So no, I hope that we are moving in that direction.
And I think it's only going to get better as far as alternative packaging that's not glass as well. I recently was reading about flax bottles. I don't know if you guys have heard about this at all, but flax is a really sustainable thing to grow. I think it might be a grass. I'm not exactly sure. And people are making bottles out of it. And they're very lightweight. They're very strong. And they're coated on the inside with this vegetable polymer that breaks down really easy. So these bottles are compostable. And the technology on it is getting better and better. So I've kind of been following that for the last few years just to see what other people are doing with it. It was mentioned, actually, one of my students in my class brought it up when I was asking for examples of sustainable packaging out in the world in one of my assignments. She was like, oh, there's this flax bottle. And then as I read into it, I was just like, this is really cool, because flax does not require a lot of irrigation in the growing of it. And it's really easy to grow. It grows quickly, and it's easy to turn over. And they do this crazy weave with a bottle that makes it so nothing leaks out of it.
It's hard to tear as well.
It's hard to tear as well. You can't pierce it necessarily unless you're trying really hard. So I think that there's going to be a lot of things that come to us as far as options, and we're going to get more and more of them as technology continues to evolve. That's something that's, our world is moving very fast, and I won't be surprised to see other options. But for now, for me, this is the best option that I could do. This is the one I feel really good about, and this works for what I'm doing in my wine production right now.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I keep hearing you come back to as well is how well this bottle works for smaller producers who want most of their sales to be in state, which, is a higher return often, if it's a direct sale, or, and so in some way that describes at least 50% of Oregon producers.
It does. It does. And I've also thought about the idea that you don't have to start with bottling your entire production in these bottles. Right? Like, a lot of people do a certain amount of production, which they know ahead of time what they're going to put into the Oregon market for glass pours for restaurants. They know what that number is. And to start with bottling part of your production to test it out, I think is a good idea. Seeing what that looks like on, a scale that you can really wrap your head around, and it works in Oregon, and you have some other bottles you could send out of state until we get the infrastructure set up to be doing this on a more nationwide scale. I feel like there are steps that you can take in any size of production.
Well, I'm going to plug how we supported you. We're willing at Cooper's. So this is my drive this year, talking about these, getting people in, or next year, I guess we're at the new year, but that's something we're super excited to help other producers get on board with this, because this is what I see as the path forward, and the only real path forward. But there it's the question, how do we see the international market working as well? I think the UK has about 45% of their wines consumed are imported in bulk, but that's something we don't really do here yet.
No.
And it goes back to the waste that comes along with that. So all the bottles have the dividers in there, whether it's pulp or little square cardboards. All that can get taken out of the system if we implement this correctly.
Yeah, that's one of the things too that's great is these bottles are thick and they're very durable, so you don't need to protect them as much with so much packaging when you ship them somewhere. Just carrying them around by the case, they're heavy bottles. So, shipping something like this is not where you want to be going with it necessarily. But I think that, when you look at the bigger picture of waste that we're looking at, you have to be able to look at this bottle and see it being a good idea because of the energy to recycle. I mean, the amount of energy used to recycle and the amount of chemicals used in recycling, I don't think people even realize like what that process is like. It is really intense. Yeah. So
all the studies, are 90% less water, 80% less electricity to melt.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a no-brainer, but it's getting there, and I'm super excited for the next steps. But
yeah, you guys have been amazing advocates for it. Like I wouldn't have known about this if you guys wouldn't have mentioned it, right? Wouldn't even cross my mind to package wine in a beer bottle.
Yeah, my hope for 2022 is that we can talk all of our friends into putting their nouveau wines at least into these bottles. Like, we know that those wines are supposed to be here and gone. It blows my mind that we're putting that kind of wine that we want to be consumed within 2 months into regular conventional bottles. It This just seems like the natural vessel for that. And I think that's one of the things that I've always been trying to like figure out for these bottles. Like, how can we convince our friends and neighbors, like, no, this is the natural, this makes sense for your wine. This makes sense for Oregon wine. This is, something that we could actually build an identity around.
Yeah. I'm hoping to kind of lead by example with that,
Right.
right? Like that was one of the reasons I did it. It was like I can show people that it is possible and you can do it in a successful way. And you guys showed me that that was possible.
Yeah.
I feel like there are definitely some hurdles in it, but the good outweighs the bad. The bottling of it is definitely a smaller scale situation too. When I bottle these wines, I borrow you guys' machine, and it's 8 at a time that
Right,
can
yeah.
go through the line. It's a long day of bottling for 250 cases. I talked to John Castile recently about the logistics in getting his bottling line up to speed for these bottles, and it's actually a $12,000 part that it's going to take to convert his line. That you can do this on a bigger scale.
Well,
Right.
the positive side of it, these are beer bottles.
Exactly.
So there are, I think
there's a lot of beer bottling lines that you could
Yeah.
use for these too. Exactly. But then if it's more accessible to the wine industry through that bottling line that they all use anyway, I think that could be a really good step for getting people behind these. So a lot of people drop their wines off at these, bottling facilities and get them bottled for them, or have the big bottling trucks come around. And if there's an adapter that you can put on these trucks that make it seamless for them to throw, 1,000 cases of this in their Oregon production as they bottle their whole, their production for the year, that might be something that makes it easier, because people, obviously, going back to that statement I said earlier, they want to do the easiest thing and the less expensive thing.
I think the poetic part, when I was doing research for this, was we talk a lot about tradition, and that's been a lot of the pushback. Traditional shapes, traditional sizes, colors of glass. But when you go back just a little before the 1800s, especially before the 60s, glass color was brown, which we got pushback for. We got comments on. But if you go back before that, refillable was it. Like, know, and for a glass that you just carry around and you refill every year and recork. So,
well, I lived in Germany for a year, and in that, I drink a lot of sparkling water, and my sparkling water was in refillable bottles. So there was literally like this carry 8-pack that you would take your water home from the grocery store with. You drink it, you bring it back in that carry pack. It's like, and the bottles that you get, they have these kind of, you can tell they've been through the refillable machines, because they have this rim that's kind of like, it's like a little bit of abrasion on the side that you can tell
develops a nice little patina.
Yeah, exactly. And you can tell they've been used a lot of times, and it felt really good to do that. I think that the one of the more exciting things that I've heard about, though, is that once the system could get on a bigger scale, we could develop a 750 ml corkable refillable bottle, and ultimately that I think is the goal, is to have different sizes of vessels from people to choose from.
Right.
But it's got to be a bigger thing, right? You have to have a standard bottle that we're looking at for the machines to be able to wash.
Right. Yeah.
And I heard a rumor, I don't know if this is totally true, but I think it's interesting that back in the 90s, this was a possibility. But because a lot of the producers wanted to kind of have their own regional style of bottles, they decided as an industry that they would skip it, because everyone wanted to have the different shape, or like a regional stamp or something like that on the bottle, or to choose the size or the weight. And so they decided not to.
Well, and weight is something we didn't touch on too much in the past, but I mean, there are bottles that are 4.5 pounds each.
Yeah.
Yeah. How crazy that's the weight of the wine.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's, it's changing. People are moving that up. Talking about lighter weight bottles, but it's not going to be enough, I think.
Right.
So I think I'm looking forward to it. Our little friend here on my left didn't have to make a cameo, so. But I think it's been a wonderful discussion. I think do you have anything else you want to cover?
I don't know. That was a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
No, so I mean, our takeaway here is that there is we might not feel hopeful, but we still need to act with hope, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's so much intention, behind putting wine in a bottle.
Uh-huh.
And if we have that much thoughtfulness in what we do every day and everything that we do, and bottling our wines and living our lives in a way where we're thinking about the future and thinking about the best way we could leave our planet, we will all be in a better place. So we need our whole community to get behind alternative packaging and recycling and refilling and doing all the things, right? All the things need to happen. But I have hope. I think it's a possibility. I'm really excited to see what happens because this is such a good idea. I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't believe in it. And I know people are going to start doing it and it's going to catch on. And like I said, it's inevitable.
Right.
Yeah. Let's just take Oregon and lead our way to the top of it.
Right. Why can't we be leaders?
Yeah. I think that's the whole point. That's what we try to pretend that we pride ourselves in, as being leaders. But sometimes I feel like being ahead of the curve can feel a little daunting and scary. So thanks so much for joining us in this endeavor. And then also thanks for coming down and sharing.
I appreciate the opportunity, guys. It's been amazing working with you and seeing what you guys have been doing, beginning with the kegged wine program that you did. I know that was hard in itself, to getting people behind wines and keg, and now look at it, everybody's doing it.
Yeah,
so
right.
It's only a matter of time.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right.
Cheers.
Cheers.